Good morning, or well, good afternoon, depending on when you are watching this. I woke up today, and for some reason I just could not move. My alarm went off at 7, like it always does, beeping on the wooden nightstand, loud, persistent, annoying. R. But I did not reach out to stop it. I just lay there. I stared at the ceiling. I watched the early morning light filter through the dusty blinds. Sometimes you wake up and you just know. Today is not going to follow the plan. Today is going to be different. Normally, my mornings are set in stone. I get out of bed immediately. I make my bed. I stretch for 10 minutes. I drink a warm glass of water. I make my coffee. I sit down at my desk by 8:15 every single day. It keeps me sane. It gives me a feeling of control. But today, the control just slipped away before my feet even touched the cold floor. I finally dragged myself out of bed at 8, an hour late. The silence in the apartment felt heavy. It felt loud. Have you ever noticed how quiet a room can be when your mind is racing? I walked into the kitchen. The floorboards creaked under my weight. I turned on the kettle. The blue light flared up. I stood there, waiting for the water to boil, just looking out the kitchen window. The sky was gray. Not a sad gray, just a calm, muted gray. The kind of sky that makes everything feel still. I grabbed my favorite mug, the blue ceramic one with the chipped handle. I poured the hot water over the coffee grounds. And then it happened. My hands were a bit shaky, or maybe I was just not paying attention. The kettle bumped the edge of the mug. Hot water and wet coffee grounds spilled everywhere, across the counter, down the front of the white wooden cabinets, splat onto my clean socks. A few days ago, I would have lost my temper. I would have cursed, grabbed paper towels frantically, and ruined my own mood for the entire morning. But today I just stood there. I looked at the dark brown liquid dripping down to the floor. Drop by drop, drip, drip, drip. I took a deep breath. I chuckled softly to myself. It was almost funny. The perfect start to a day that was already refusing to be normal. I cleaned up the mess slowly. I wiped the counter. I wiped the cabinets. I tossed my wet socks into the laundry hamper. I did not remake the coffee. I took that as a sign. A sign that I needed to step outside. So I did something I almost never do. I left my laptop on the desk. I left my to-do list untouched. I pulled on a light jacket, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. No plan, no destination, just walking. The air outside was crisp. It smelled like wet pavement and damp leaves. The streets were quiet. The morning rush hour had already passed. The people rushing to work were already sitting in their offices. The streets belonged to the walkers now, to the old men sitting on park benches, to the street sweepers, to people like me who were suddenly floating outside of their usual timelines. I walked down the main road, but then I turned left into an alleyway I usually ignore. I have lived in this neighborhood for over 2 years. 2 years. And I have walked past this narrow alley hundreds of times, always looking straight ahead, always rushing to get somewhere. To the grocery store, to the gym, to the bus stop. Today, I walked down that alley. It was narrow and lined with brick walls covered in old moss and faded graffiti. Halfway down, I found a tiny bakery. I had no idea it was even there. The smell hit me before I saw the sign. Fresh bread, butter, warm sugar. There was a small chalkboard outside. Written in white chalk in shaky handwriting, it said, "Fresh cinnamon rolls at 9 a.m." I looked at my watch. It was 9:05. I opened the door. A small brass bell jingled above my head. Ting. Inside, there was only one table. The shop was tiny. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman with silver hair tucked into a neat bun. She looked up and smiled at me. Not a polite customer service smile. A real warm, crinkly-eyed smile. She said, "Good morning, dear. You look like you need a warm roll." I laughed. Was it that obvious? I ordered a black coffee and a fresh cinnamon roll. She handed them to me on a small wooden tray. I sat down at that single small table by the window. I took a bite of the roll. It was warm. The dough was soft, melted cinnamon and brown sugar filling my mouth. It was probably the best thing I had tasted in months. I sat there for almost an hour, just sipping coffee, looking out at the quiet alley, watching the steam rise from my cup. Are. Normally, sitting doing nothing for an hour makes me feel guilty. My brain starts whispering, you should be working, you should be editing, you should be answering emails. But today, that quiet voice was silent. The day felt short, but it felt deep. Are. Every minute felt heavier, richer, like time had slowed down just for me. While I was sitting there, a small stray cat came out from under a parked car across the alley, a little orange tabby with a torn ear. It walked slowly, cautiously, sniffing the damp ground. R. Then a young boy came walking down the alley with his father. The boy was holding a bright red balloon. He was jumping over puddles, laughing. Suddenly he slipped. He did not fall hard, but he dropped the string of his balloon. The red balloon began to float away. R. Up past the brick walls, up towards the gray sky. The boy stopped. He looked up. His face crumpled. I thought he was going to cry. His father reached down to comfort him. But then the boy did something unexpected. He did not cry. R. He just stood there, watching the red dot get smaller and smaller against the gray clouds. Then he waved. He waved goodbye to the balloon. He smiled a tiny, bittersweet smile, took his father's hand, and kept walking. I watched that happen from behind the glass window. It was such a small moment. It took 10 seconds. But it hit me so hard. How often do we hold on so tightly to things that slip away? And how often do we just stand there, wave goodbye, and keep walking? That small moment stayed with me. It felt like the universe was trying to tell me something in that quiet, unspoken way it sometimes does. Around 10:30, I paid for my coffee and said goodbye to the bakery lady. She told me to come back soon. I promised her I would. I decided to head back home. But instead of taking the direct route, I walked through the small neighborhood park. The park was empty, except for a few birds hopping around on the grass. The trees were starting to lose their leaves. Yellow and brown leaves covered the gravel paths. Crunch, crunch, crunch under my shoes. I sat down on a damp wooden bench. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had 5 missed calls, all from the same number. My heart did a little drop. You know that feeling, right? When you see multiple missed calls from someone you have not talked to in a while, and your stomach just twists into a knot. The calls were from an old friend, someone I used to be very close with a few years ago. We had a falling out. Nothing huge, no massive explosion. Just a slow drift apart, fueled by pride, misunderstandings, and silence. We had not spoken in almost 18 months. My hands felt cold. My mind immediately went into defense mode. Why is he calling? Is something wrong? Is he angry? Does he want to stir up old drama? I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the call button. I could just ignore it. I could slip the phone back into my pocket and pretend I never saw it. That would be the easy way out. That would keep my quiet day calm and safe. But then I thought about that little boy waving at his lost balloon. I thought about how much energy it takes to hold on to things that are already gone, or things that are broken. I pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. He answered on the 4th ring. Hello? His voice sounded hesitant, a little tight. Hey, I said. My voice was a little raspy. I saw you called. There was a long pause, a heavy, uncomfortable pause where neither of us knew what to say. The silence stretched between us through the phone line. I could hear the wind rustling through the trees in the park. I could hear his distant breathing. Finally, he spoke. I was just calling to say I am sorry, he said. Just like that. No long introduction. No beating around the bush. He explained that he was cleaning out his closet this morning. He found an old jacket I had left at his place 3 years ago. He picked it up, remembered a joke we made the night I left it there, and suddenly felt a wave of regret. He realized how silly our silence had been. How much time we had wasted being proud. We talked for 40 minutes on that damp park bench. We did not fix everything. We did not pretend that the last 18 months never happened. There were still awkward moments in the conversation, still things that were left unsaid. But the weight was gone. The dark cloud that had been hovering in the back of my mind for over a year had vanished. It was a strange conversation. It was uncomfortable at times, sweet at times, emotional at times. But when I hung up, I felt 10 pounds lighter. R. I looked at the clock on my phone. It was almost noon. Half the day was gone. I had not opened my laptop. I had not checked my work emails. I had not completed a single task on my carefully planned checklist. And yet I felt more accomplished than I had in weeks. R. I walked back to my apartment. When I stepped inside, the place felt different. It was the same apartment, the same furniture, the same dirty dish in the sink from my coffee morning spill, but the atmosphere had changed. Or maybe I had changed. R. I decided to finally sit down at my desk. I opened my laptop. I worked for 3 hours straight. No distractions, no scrolling on my phone, no jumping between tabs, just pure, focused work. It was amazing. Usually it takes me 5 hours to finish a video script. R. Today, because my mind was clear, because I was present, I finished it in 2. Sometimes breaking your routine is not a waste of time. It is an investment, it clears out the mental clutter so you can actually do what you need to do. R. By 4 in the afternoon, the sky outside began to darken. The gray clouds got heavier. A soft, steady rain started to fall. I love the sound of rain against the window pane. Tap, tap, tap. It creates this cozy, insulated world inside your room. I closed my laptop. R. I went into the kitchen to prepare dinner. Normally, for dinner, I make something quick. Instant noodles, a quick sandwich, or leftovers from the freezer. Anything fast so I can get back to watching television or working late into the night. Today, I wanted to cook. Really cook. R. I pulled out fresh vegetables from the fridge, carrots, onions, garlic, potatoes, tomatoes. I got out my big wooden cutting board and my sharpest knife. I started chopping. Chop, chop, chop. I listened to the sound of the knife hitting the wood. R. I listened to the sizzle of the garlic and onions hitting the hot olive oil in the pan. The smell filled the entire apartment. Warm, savory, rich. I was making a simple vegetable stew. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated, just wholesome, real food made from scratch. R. As the stew was simmering on the stove, bubbling gently, I sat at the kitchen counter. I pulled out a small paper notebook. Not my work journal, not my goal planner, just a blank notebook. I started writing, not for a video, not for social media, just for me. R. I wrote about the coffee spill.